But let's go back and let's talk about what newspapers did. I was a foreign correspondent. You were a business reporter. Let's talk about, because I want to compare that to the void that's happened now. Let's talk about, go back to your own experience as a reporter, but you did even more than that, Gretchen. I mean, it was about holding these people accountable.
Holding them accountable, shining the light on the dark corners, shining the light on the practices that were full of conflicts that really enabled them to take advantage of investors, take advantage of workers, give those people who don't generally have a voice a voice. And so I would really always try to get to the individual and avoid the C-suite or the CEOs because they're not going to tell me anything of any import. Many of my sources, best sources, were workers who would call me. They would see something going on in their company and tell me about it because they didn't think it was the right thing. So again, it was that ground up reporting, which you yourself know well. You did for decades out in the field as a war correspondent. You're going to get those stories best from the people on the ground in the trenches doing the work. You're not going to get the stories from the CEOs.
Yeah, I used to say in war, the higher you go up within the ranking system, the more untruthfulness you're going to find. That's why you better stay with the privates and the lance corporals. But that comes with pressure because you have powerful interests that don't like it. And I think we have to acknowledge that they had influence within the organizations. We both worked for the New York Times. You worked for the Wall Street Journal. And let's talk about the kinds of pressures they are able to exert within a commercial media that needs those advertising dollars in order to function.
Well, there is a chilling effect that they try to exert. When you contact a company with the story, obviously, I'm always very open with these companies that I write about and the people that I write about what my topic is and what I'm saying and what I've heard and why I'm reporting and why I'm contacting them. When those wheels start turning and they understand that it's going to be potentially critical story, showing an aspect of the side of their business they don't want out there, then they start to exert pressure, send lawyer letters, attacking the reporter, attacking the information that the reporter has, gleaned from sources, questioning the sources, etc. So it's just, that's the way the world works. And if, you have to be able to stand up to that as a reporter, but even more important, you have to have an editor who is going to stand up for that with you. And this is where I think we start to see some of the fault lines now. You've got probably still an array of reporters who are, willing to go out and get the story no matter what. But do they have bosses that are willing to take the heat, take the pressure, and continue down the path? That is a question.
Well, of course, it's become these organizations have become more anemic. They've become more cautious because they don't want to lose the dwindling advertising dollars that they have. I want to make a point about institutions because we both worked within institutions. So let's talk about, because, at the introduction, I'm talking about the collapse of national media. I mean, the Washington Post is in serious trouble. The papers that are still around have slashed their Washington bureaus. I mean, there are, very, very few reporters. And that's important because let's say you're from the Philadelphia Inquirer, or, what had once been a major regional paper. You're going to focus on issues in Washington that affect residents of Philadelphia or
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Yes.
That's gone. That's not being done. So we talked about the collapse of rural. What are the consequences of the collapse of the national press? And we should be clear, these papers, like if 20, 30 years ago, you bought the Sunday Philadelphia Inquirer, you're talking about a 5-pound paper. I mean, you're talking about 750 reporters and editors. These were major journalistic enterprises. That's gone. These papers are a shell of what they were. The staffs have been eviscerated. Let's talk about the consequences nationally.
Well, you just think about it in terms of Washington. I mean, the superstructure in Washington, you have the regulatory agencies, you have the, Department of Defense, you have Health and Human Services. I mean, these are gargantuan entities that really need to be covered, that really need to be understood. They're affecting everyone's lives across the nation. And if you don't have people who are sophisticated and knowledgeable and aggressive about covering them, then they're going to be left to do whatever they please. And it's going to have enormous impacts down the line on people. It's going to be impacts on their health, on their pensions, on their futures, on their children's lives. I mean, it's across the board. And if you don't have reporters questioning what's going on in these, huge agencies and the White House, then, oh my gosh, scary.
Well, and also, in order, let's say you cover the Pentagon or you cover the Department of Energy, you need a body of knowledge. You can't just fly in and do it.
Right.
It takes years to really understand and report well. And so we're losing that sense of expertise, especially with staff cuts, because when news organizations do buyouts, they buy out those with the most experience.
Right. Gosh, I mean, I think it's a shared thing. I mean, I don't know if it's 50-50, I don't know if it's 75-25, but media, they make mistakes. It's part of the job is difficult to brook. Like if there's a tragedy, you've got reporters sticking microphones in people's faces and saying, tell me how it felt to, see your child die or whatever. I mean, there are ugly aspects to the news gathering business that certainly can, turn people off. But, it is important to get the facts.
Where are we going? What's happening in terms of journalism?
Gosh, I don't have a crystal ball on this. I think it gets worse. There are all kinds of people talking about what can be done. Should the government intervene? I think that's a bad idea. Does it maybe become smaller entities that serve an audience that is willing to pay more money for